The city of Darren was burning. Thick black smoke rose from broken buildings and filled the sky like a dark curtain pulled over the sun. The streets were empty. No children played near the fountain in the old square. No old men sat outside their doors with glasses of tea. Everyone had either run away already or was hiding somewhere deep inside their homes, waiting for the sound of the guns to stop. But the guns did not stop. They had not stopped for 3 years. Rayan pressed his back against a cold stone wall and listened. Somewhere close, boots were hitting the broken road. Soldiers. He could not tell whose soldiers they were anymore. In the country of Cavan, the lines had blurred a long time ago. The government army wore green uniforms with a gold badge on the shoulder. The rebel fighters wore whatever they could find: old jackets, farm clothes, sometimes stolen green uniforms. Both sides destroyed everything in their path and called it necessary. He pulled his bag tighter over his shoulder and looked around the corner. The street ahead was empty. He ran. Rayan had lived in Darren his whole life. He was 24 years old, thin but strong, with dust on his face and a scar on his chin from a fall he had taken as a boy. He knew every alley, every broken fence, every narrow shortcut between the old market and the river road. That knowledge had kept him alive when many others around him had not been so lucky. His mother had left 6 months ago, crossing the northern hills with a group of families from their street. She had stood at the door with tears on her face and begged him to come with her. He had told her the war would be over soon. He had been wrong. He had been very, very wrong. He ducked into the doorway of an old bakery. The windows had been blown out long ago and the door hung on one hinge. The inside smelled of ash and old flour and something burnt. He stopped when he heard a voice from the back of the room. "Don't move." The words were in English. Rayan turned slowly, keeping his hands visible at his sides. A woman stood near the back wall, holding a small camera in both hands like it was a weapon she wasn't sure how to use. She was tall, with short dark hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. She looked like she had not slept in 2 or 3 days. Her clothes were dusty and there was a small cut on her left hand, wrapped in a piece of cloth. "I'm not a soldier," Rayan said, also in English. He had learned the language from his uncle, who had spent 5 years working with foreign aid workers in the capital before the war made that kind of work impossible. The woman lowered the camera slowly. "Sorry," she said. Her voice was calm but tight. "I thought you were one of them." Her name was Mara. She was a journalist from another country, one far from Cavan, sent here to report on the war and the people caught inside it. But her driver had been shot 2 days ago on a road outside the city, and her local fixer, the man who helped her move and translate and stay safe, had simply disappeared the morning after. She was alone with her camera, a small backpack, a phone with no signal, and no way out of the city. "You need to leave this district," Rayan told her quietly. "They are moving through here tonight. By morning, this whole part of the city will be under rebel control. Anyone found here will be questioned. Some will not be let go." "Then let's go," Mara said simply. They heard a sound from above, a heavy footstep, then another, slow and careful. Both of them looked up at the cracked ceiling. Dust fell like fine snow. Someone was on the floor above them. Rayan picked up a long piece of broken wood from the floor. Mara stepped behind him without being asked. The footsteps came slowly down the narrow staircase at the back of the bakery. Each step made the old wood creak. Then a figure appeared in the low gray light. He was a big man, broad in the shoulders, with a short beard and a fresh cut above his left eye that had dried dark. He wore no uniform. He carried himself with the careful stillness of someone trained to walk into dangerous rooms. His name was Cole. He had been a soldier once years ago, fighting in a different country for a different reason. After that, he had worked for a private security company, protecting aid convoys and foreign workers in places the rest of the world tried to forget. He had been in Cavan for 2 months when his team was hit by an ambush the previous afternoon. 3 men dead, 2 taken. Cole had crawled out from under a wrecked vehicle in the dark and walked until he found the bakery, where he had slept for 4 hours on the floor of the room above. Easy, he said, raising both hands, palms out. I'm not armed, lost my weapon in the ambush. The three of them stood in the ruined bakery and looked at each other with careful eyes. Nobody smiled. Nobody said that everything would be fine. They were strangers, and strangers in a war were a risk. But they were also alone, and alone in Darren at night was almost a death sentence. There is a way out, Cole said. His voice was flat and steady, the voice of someone who had learned long ago not to show fear in his face. The northern bridge is gone. I saw it fall 2 days ago. The eastern road is closed by rebel checkpoints, but there is a route south through the old factory district at the edge of the city, then down to the town of Bellas. From Bellas there is a road that reaches the border. Rayan knew the factory district. It was a dark and broken place, full of collapsed roofs and narrow passages, easy places for soldiers to wait and watch. But Cole was right. It was the only direction that was not already closed. How do you know this? Mara asked Cole, watching him carefully. I spent 2 months studying the maps of this city, he said. It was part of my job. I know the layout. I don't know every danger on the ground, but I know the direction. They agreed to move together, not because they trusted each other or because they had talked it through and decided it was the best plan. Simply because none of them had a better choice, and 3 people moving together were harder to take down than 1 person moving alone. They left the bakery when the sound of boots on the nearby road faded into the distance. The sky was fully dark now, and fires at the edges of the city lit everything in shades of orange and deep red. Rayan led the way. He moved quickly and without sound, pressing close to the walls, stopping at every corner to look before stepping out. Cole stayed close behind the group and watched the way they had come. Mara kept her camera tucked inside her jacket and followed without speaking. They were 3 streets from the factory district when Rayan raised his fist and stopped. Everyone froze. He pointed to a side alley on the left. They turned into it and pressed themselves back into the deep shadow between 2 walls. A group of soldiers moved past on the main road, 7 of them walking in a loose line with rifles hanging from their shoulders. They were talking to each other in low voices. One of them laughed at something, a short and careless laugh. The group in the alley did not breathe too loudly. The soldiers passed the end of the alley without looking in. Their footsteps faded. Then someone coughed. It came from deeper inside the alley, from the darkness further back. Everyone turned at once. Crouched beside a rusted metal door with her knees pulled up to her chest and a cloth pressed to her mouth was a young woman. She looked no more than 20 years old. She had a small bag held tight in her lap. Her eyes were wide and dark with fear, but she did not run. She had nowhere left to run. Her name was Nadia. She had been working as an assistant to a doctor in the neighborhood, helping to carry medicine to families who could not travel to the main clinic. That afternoon, a shell had hit the clinic building while she was 2 streets away on an errand. When she came back, the building was a pile of smoking stone. The doctor, who had been like a second father to her, was gone. She had stood there for a long moment, not able to move. Then she had grabbed her bag, which still had medicine inside, and she had walked until her legs stopped working, and she sat down in the alley and waited for something to happen. "You come with us," Rayan said quietly. He did not ask Cole or Mara. He simply said it like it was already decided. Cole looked at the bag in her arms. "What's in there?" "Medicine," Nadia said. Her voice was steady despite everything. "Bandages, painkillers, some antibiotics. The doctor always said, keep the medicine safe above everything else." Cole looked at the bag for one more moment, then nodded once. "Good. We may need them before this is over." They moved again, 4 of them now, moving in a quiet line through the burning city. Rayan still led. The factory district was very close. The dark, tall shapes of old chimneys rose against the red sky like broken fingers pointing up at nothing. At the edge of the district, Rayan stopped again. Something felt wrong. He could not explain exactly what it was. A smell that did not belong, or maybe a silence in a place where there should have been the sound of wind moving through broken walls. He looked back at Cole. Cole had stopped too. He was staring at the ground between two collapsed walls. Then Rayan saw it, a thin wire, stretched low across the path, almost invisible in the dark. A tripwire connected to something hidden in the rubble. Cole pointed down at it without a word. Rayan leaned in close and studied it. His heart was beating hard and fast, but he made his hand stay still. Very carefully, he stepped over the wire. Then he turned and held his hand out to Nadia. One by one, all four of them crossed over the wire without touching it and moved into the factory district. Old machines sat rusting in open spaces. Walls had fallen and left long piles of broken brick. Glass crunched softly under their feet and Rayan winced at every small sound. They moved slowly, checking the ground before every step. They reached a wide, open courtyard at the center of the district. It had once been used for loading heavy trucks. On the far side of the courtyard was the road that led south toward Bella's. They were almost through. But they were not alone in the courtyard. Huddled against the far wall between two large old crates was an old man. He saw them the same moment they saw him. He did not run or shout. He simply looked at them with calm, dark eyes. He was perhaps 60 years old, with white hair and a long brown coat that had seen better days. At his feet was a small fire burning inside a metal tin, small enough that no one outside the courtyard walls could see the light. "I thought I was the last one left in this part of the city," the old man said in the local language. Rayan translated for Cole and Mara. "Who are you?" Rayan asked him. The old man looked at each of them in turn. His expression was careful and measured. It was not the look of fear, and it was not the simple relief of a lonely man finding company. It was something more complicated than both of those things. "My name is Tarek," he said quietly, "and I know a safer way through to Bella's, one that avoids the main checkpoints, but to use it you will have to trust me." No one answered right away. The small fire crackled inside its tin. Somewhere far behind them in the city, a single gunshot rang out and then went silent. Rayan looked at Cole. Cole looked at Mara. Mara looked at Nadia. And they all looked at the old man with the white hair and the calm, unreadable eyes. They had no map. They had no weapons. The road ahead was long and full of soldiers and darkness and things they could not yet see. Sometimes, the only thing a person has left to hold on to is a stranger's word. Rayan nodded at the old man. "Show us the way," he said. Tarek did not rush. That was the first thing Rayan noticed about him. Most people in the city moved fast, with their heads down and their eyes wide, running from one shadow to the next. But the old man walked with a slow and careful step, like someone reading a book he had already read before and knew every page of. He moved through the factory district as if the broken walls and dark spaces held no surprises for him. He stepped around rubble without looking down. He knew exactly where to place his feet. Cole watched Tarek from behind and said nothing. His jaw was tight. He did not like depending on a man he had met 5 minutes ago. But his eyes moved constantly, checking the walls, the rooftops, the spaces between old machines. Even without a weapon, he was working. It was the only thing he knew how to do well. Mara stayed close to Rayan and spoke in a low voice. "Do you know him? Have you seen him before?" "No," Rayan said. "But he speaks like someone from the south, from the villages near the border country." "That's where we're going," Mara said. "Yes," Rayan said. "That's why I'm not stopping him." Nadia walked quietly at the back. She held her bag of medicine tight against her chest, one arm wrapped around it like she was carrying something alive. She had not cried since the clinic was destroyed, not even for a moment. There had been no time for crying. She told herself she would cry later when she was somewhere safe. She was not sure that place existed anymore, but she kept the idea of it in the back of her mind like a small lamp in a dark room. Tarek led them out of the factory district through a break in the outer wall that looked like nothing more than a pile of fallen bricks. But when Rayan looked closely, He saw that the bricks had been moved aside carefully and stacked to make a low passage just wide enough for a person to squeeze through sideways. Tarek had done this himself, Rayan realized. The old man had planned a way out. They came through the wall one at a time and found themselves on a narrow dirt path between two rows of dead trees. The path ran south, away from the city. On either side, the ground was flat and open. Too open. The burning city behind them gave off enough light to make their shadows long and dark on the ground. "We crossed this open stretch fast," Cole said, speaking for the first time in a while. "If anyone is watching from the tree line further south, they'll see us. Move quickly. Don't stop." Tarek simply started walking. The others followed. They crossed the open ground in less than 3 minutes, moving fast without running, and reached a line of thick, low bushes on the far side. They pushed through and stopped on the other side to breathe. Cavan's countryside at night was a strange thing. During the day, the hills and fields had always been beautiful green and gold depending on the season, with villages tucked into the lower slopes and goats moving slowly along the ridges. But the war had changed the land the way it changed everything. Some fields had been burned, others had been dug up for trenches or barriers. The villages that Rayan could see from the high ground as they moved were mostly dark. No lights, no fires. Just dark shapes sitting silent under the stars. They walked for 2 hours without stopping. Tarek kept to paths that ran along the bases of low hills rather than across the tops, where they could be seen. He avoided the main road entirely, leading the group through dry riverbeds and along the edges of old orchards where the fruit trees stood like dark ghosts. Cole finally walked up beside Tarek. "How do you know these paths?" he asked, letting Rayan translate. Tarek walked a few more steps before answering. "I have walked them many times," he said. "For many years. Before the war, I worked for the government. I moved between the capital and the southern towns, carrying documents, meeting people, passing messages. I learned the back roads because they were safer than the main ones. Even before the war, some roads were not good for a man in my position." Cole thought about this. "What was your position?" he asked. Tarek looked at him sideways. "I was a translator," he said, "for government officials, sometimes for foreign visitors. People spoke in front of me without thinking because they forgot that a translator hears everything." Cole said nothing more, but the look on his face said he had stored the information carefully and was not finished thinking about it. They stopped before dawn at a low stone building that had once been used to store farm tools. The roof was partly gone, but 3 of the 4 walls were solid. They settled inside, sitting on the hard dirt floor. Tarek found a place in the corner and closed his eyes almost immediately. Within minutes he appeared to be asleep. Nadia opened her bag and checked her supplies by the light of a small torch. Bandages, still clean and folded. 4 small bottles of antibiotics. A flat tin of painkillers. A roll of tape and a pair of scissors. She counted everything quietly and put it back. Mara sat beside Rayan and finally charged her camera using a small battery pack she kept in her jacket. She looked at the images she had taken inside the city. Buildings turned to rubble. A child's shoe sitting in the middle of a street. An old door painted blue, still standing perfectly on its frame while everything around it had fallen down. She looked at each image for a long time without speaking. "Do you have family?" Rayan asked her, keeping his voice low. "A sister," Mara said. "She keeps telling me to come home. She sends me messages every day." "Why don't you go?" Mara looked at the image of the blue door on her camera screen. "Because if I go, nobody tells this story. And if nobody tells this story, it's like it isn't happening. And it is happening." She turned the camera off. "It very much is happening." Cole sat by the broken section of the wall where the roof had fallen in, looking up at the sky. The stars were very bright away from the city. He did not sleep. He had not slept properly in 2 days, and he felt it in his shoulders and behind his eyes, but his mind would not be still. He kept running through everything he knew about the route ahead. Bella's was maybe 30 kilometers south. Under normal conditions, that was a one-day walk, but conditions were not normal. There would be checkpoints on every main road. There would be patrols on the smaller paths, and there was the issue of Tarek, sleeping so quietly in the corner, who had given them information about himself but not enough. Never quite enough. Rayan took the first watch, sitting near the entrance with a piece of broken pipe he had picked up in the factory district. It was not a weapon, not really, but holding it made him feel slightly less helpless. He looked out at the dark countryside and thought about his mother, somewhere in the north. He hoped she had crossed by now. He hoped she was sitting in a warm room somewhere, eating something hot, waiting for news of him. He pushed the thought away. Thinking about the people you loved when you were in danger was its own kind of trap. It made you want to stop moving, and stopping was not an option. Just before the sky began to lighten in the east, Cole woke everyone quietly. They ate what little food they had. Rayan had some dried bread in his bag. Nadia had 3 small apples. Mara had 2 energy bars she broke into pieces and shared without being asked. Tarek ate what was given to him and said thank you with a slight bow of his head. They moved out as the first gray light came into the sky. Tarek led them east for a while before turning south again, following a ridge that kept them just below the skyline. Cole dropped back to walk beside Cole, and they moved in silence until Cole held up a hand. Below them, in a shallow valley, a dirt road ran between 2 low hills, and on that road, a military vehicle was parked sideways, blocking the way. 2 soldiers stood beside it, smoking. Another sat on top of the vehicle with a heavy gun resting across his knees. "Government or rebel?" Myra whispered. Rayan looked carefully at the uniforms. Green, with a gold badge. Government. But the government soldiers in the South had a reputation for being just as dangerous as the rebels to anyone they did not recognize. Strangers on the road were trouble. Foreigners were worse. "We go around," Tarek said quietly, already moving to the left along the ridge. They followed him without debate. The detour added an hour to their walk and took them through a steep section of hillside where the ground was loose, and they had to grab at rocks and root stumps to keep from sliding. Nadia slipped once and grabbed Rayan's arm. He caught her and held on until she was steady. She looked at him with something that was not quite a smile but was close to it. They came back down to flat ground on the far side of the checkpoint and rejoined the south direction. The sun was up now, pale and cold, and the countryside stretched ahead of them in shades of gray and yellow. In the middle distance, Rayan could see the dark shapes of a small town sitting at the bottom of a wide slope. "Bella's?" he asked Tarek. "Not yet," the old man said. "That is Merka, a village. There may be people there or there may not be. It is hard to say these days." Cole studied the village from a distance for a long moment. "We should avoid it," he said. But even as he said it, they all heard the sound. It came from somewhere ahead, from the direction of the village. It was the sound of a car engine moving fast, and then voices shouting, and then 3 sharp gunshots. Everyone stopped. Then came the sound that none of them expected. Underneath all of it, high and thin, was the sound of a child crying. Nadia was already moving forward before anyone could speak. Cole grabbed her arm. "Wait," he said. "There's a child," she said, looking at him with flat, clear eyes. "There might also be soldiers," he said. "There is definitely a child," she said again. Cole held her arm for 2 more seconds, then he let go. They moved toward the village together, fast and low, using the wall of a fallen orchard fence as cover. Rayan went first, moving in close to the first building and looking around the corner. What he saw made him draw a sharp breath. A military truck was parked in the middle of the village's small square. Soldiers, rebels, not government by the look of the clothes, were pulling bags and boxes from the front doors of the buildings around the square. Looting. A man lay on the ground near the truck, not moving. An older woman knelt beside him, her hands pressed to his chest, shaking her head back and forth. And standing in the doorway of the largest building was a young boy, perhaps 6 years old, crying with his whole body. The rebels had not seen the group, not yet. Cole looked at Rayan. Rayan looked at Tarek. The old man's face was very still. "How many?" Cole asked Rayan quietly. Rayan counted the visible soldiers. 5, maybe more inside. Cole checked the ground around him with his eyes, the way he always did, looking for anything useful. A rock, a stick, a piece of pipe. Something. Anything. Because 5 armed soldiers against 5 unarmed people was not a fight. It was a slaughter. And whatever was going to happen in the next few minutes would decide not just their morning, but perhaps all the mornings that came after. Cole made a decision in 10 seconds. That was how he had always worked. Not fast enough to be reckless, not slow enough to be paralyzed. 10 seconds of looking, thinking, counting, and then a choice. The choice was usually not a good one. In a bad situation, there were no good choices. There were only choices that hurt less than the others. "We don't fight them," he said quietly, his back against the stone wall with the others pressed close. "We wait. They are looting. They want things, not people. When they go back to the truck to load their bags, there will be a window, maybe 1 minute, maybe 2, when their backs are turned. We use that window to move the child and the woman away from the square. Then we run." "What about the man on the ground?" Mara asked. Cole looked at her. His face was not cold exactly, but it was very careful. "He is not moving," he said. Mara closed her eyes for 1 second, then she opened them again. "Okay," she said. Nadia had already understood, because she had also been looking at the man on the ground, and she also knew what it meant when a person lay that still. She pressed her lips together and said nothing. They waited. Rayan watched the square between 2 broken bricks in the orchard wall, his eyes barely above the top. He counted the rebels again. 5 he could see clearly. One was older, maybe 40, with a red cloth tied around his head. He appeared to be in charge. He shouted at the others and pointed at the buildings, and they went in and came out with arms full of food and cloth and small objects. The way they moved, fast and businesslike, told Rayan they had done this in other villages before this one. They knew how to loot quickly. The red cloth man walked to the truck and began stacking things in the back. 2 others joined him. The remaining 2 were still inside the buildings. "Now," Cole said. Rayan moved first. He went around the far end of the orchard wall and came at the square from the left side, keeping a building between himself and the truck. Cole went right, moving fast and low, staying in the shadow of the building fronts. Mara stayed back with Tarek. Nadia came in from the left behind Rayan, her bag pressed to her side. The old woman looked up when she heard Rayan's footstep. Her eyes went wide. Rayan put one finger to his lips and held out his hand. She looked at him for a moment that felt much longer than it was. Then she reached up and took his hand and let him help her to her feet. Cole was at the doorway. He reached inside, took the boy by the shoulders, and lifted him close. The boy stopped crying. Children in a war zone learned quickly that silence could mean survival. Someone had taught this boy that lesson already. He wrapped his arms around Cole's neck and went completely quiet. They pulled back the way they had come, fast and silent, crouching low between the buildings. The red cloth man was still at the truck. His back was turned. Nobody shouted. Nobody raised an alarm. They passed back through the gap in the orchard wall and did not stop moving until they were 50 meters into the dead trees on the far side. Only then did Cole set the boy down. The old woman, she was the boy's grandmother. It turned out, put both hands on the boy's face and looked at him, and then looked at the sky, and said something quietly in the local language that Rayan chose not to translate for the others. Some things did not need translation. Her name was Fatima. Her son, the man who had been lying on the ground, had been hit by the first shot when he stepped out to see what the truck was. He had died quickly. She said this in a flat, quiet voice, like someone reporting the weather. Rayan knew that flatness. He had heard it in many voices over 3 years of war. It was what happened to a person after they had cried so many times that the tears had nothing left to hold on to. "She cannot come with us," Tarek said, speaking softly. "She is too old for the journey and she knows this land. She will find a way to stay safe." Fatima nodded when Rayan translated this. She looked at the boy for a long moment and then back at the old man. She said something to Tariq directly in the southern dialect, and Tariq answered her in the same way. Something passed between them, something Rayan did not entirely follow. "She says there is a family in the next valley," Tariq said. "Distant relatives, the boy can go to them." He looked at the boy. "He knows the path." The boy, whose name they learned was Sami, looked up at Cole. His face was very serious. Cole looked back at him. Something passed between the big man and the small boy that needed no words either. Cole put one hand briefly on top of the boy's head. Then the boy turned and walked into the trees in the direction Fatima pointed, without looking back. Mara had been filming. Not the soldiers in the square, not the looting that had been too dangerous, but this. The old woman's face, the boy walking into the trees alone. She lowered the camera and stood still for a moment. "You keep filming," Rayan said to her, not as a question. "I always keep filming," Mara said. She said it like it was both the simplest thing in the world and the hardest. They moved south again. Tariq pushed them hard for the next hour, saying they needed to be far from Merca before the rebels finished looting and drove their truck south on the main road. The group moved through a long valley where a stream ran between flat banks. They crossed the stream twice, the cold water coming up past their ankles. Nadia's shoes were soaked and made small wet sounds with every step. It was past noon when they found the farmhouse. It was not completely abandoned. That was the first surprise. As they approached the low stone building, moving carefully, a face appeared at the window, a woman, middle-aged, watching them approach with dark and careful eyes. Tariq raised one hand in the local greeting and called out in the southern dialect. After a long pause, the door opened. There were 4 people inside. A woman named Hessa and her husband Basim, who had a bandage wrapped around his lower leg from a wound he had received 2 weeks earlier. Their teenage daughter, Lena, who stood in the corner and watched everything with wide, intelligent eyes. And a very old man, Basim's father, who sat in a chair by the cold fireplace and seemed to exist in a different time from everyone else in the room. Hessa gave them water and some hard bread and dried beans that she heated over a small fire in the back room, where the smoke could not be seen from outside. She asked no questions about who they were or where they were going. She had learned, like many people in Cavan, that questions and answers were a form of danger. What you didn't know, you couldn't be forced to say. While the others ate, Nadia looked at Basim's leg. She unwrapped the old bandage carefully, and what she saw made her face go tight. The wound was not clean. She used some of her antiseptic and fresh bandage, working quietly and quickly. Basim watched her hands and said nothing. "It needs more time than this," Nadia told him when she was done. "Keep it dry. Don't walk on it more than you must." He nodded, then he said very quietly, "Where are you going?" "South," she said, "toward the border." He nodded again. He did not say good luck, which was what most people would have said. He said, "May you find what you are looking for," which was a different thing entirely. It was Lena, the teenage daughter, who came to Rayan while the others were resting. She came quietly, like someone who had something to say but had not decided whether to say it yet. "There is a man," she said in a low voice, "in the village below this farm. He walks the road every day. He talks to the rebels at the checkpoint when they pass through." She paused. "He tells them about people moving through." Rayan felt something cold move through him. "What is his name?" "We call him Dodd," she said. "He does it for food, for himself and his family. I don't think he is a bad man, but he does it." Rayan looked at her for a moment. "Does he know we are here?" "Not yet," Lena said. "But if he sees you on the south path, he will tell them by evening." Rayan thanked her. She went back to her corner without another word. Rayan stood still for a moment, then walked to where Cole was sitting against the wall with his eyes closed. He did not look like he was sleeping. He never fully looked like he was sleeping. "We have a problem," Rayan said quietly. Cole opened his eyes. Rayan told him what Lena had said. Cole listened without interrupting. When Rayan finished, Cole looked across the room at Tarek, who was sitting apart from the others, eating his bread slowly and staring at the floor with a thoughtful expression. "There's another thing," Cole said. His voice was very quiet now, below the reach of the others. "Tarek, when he spoke to the old woman in the village, he said something to her that I want you to translate for me exactly." Rayan thought back. He had caught pieces of the exchange. The southern dialect was not quite his own, but he had understood most of it. He told her the group was moving through, that they were heading for the Bella's crossing. He said he knew the border guard captain. Rayan paused. He said the captain owed him a favor. Cole stared at him. "He knows the border guard captain." "That's what he said." Cole was quiet for a long time. A former government translator who knows the border guard captain, who knows the back paths through the hills like he has walked them 100 times, who is traveling south alone in a war zone without any apparent fear. He looked at Tarek again. "Does that sound like an ordinary old man to you?" Rayan had no answer for that, because the honest answer was no. It did not sound like an ordinary old man at all. On the other side of the room, Tarek looked up from the floor and found Cole watching him. The old man met the look calmly, with those dark, unreadable eyes. Then he looked back down at his bread and continued eating. Mara appeared at Rayan's shoulder. She had heard enough of the exchange to follow the shape of it, even without the translation. "Do you trust him?" she asked Rayan. Rayan looked at the old man for a long moment. "I think he is taking us where he says he is taking us," he said. "Whether that is because he wants to help us, or because he wants us there for a reason we don't know yet." He stopped. "I don't know." Cole stood up. "We leave in 1 hour," he said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "We take the east path below the ridge. We avoid the south village entirely." Tarek looked up. For just a moment something moved in his expression. It was there and gone too quickly to name. Then he nodded. "The east path is longer," he said, "but it is possible." They thanked Hessa and her family and stepped back out into the cold afternoon. The sky had turned gray while they rested and the air smelled like rain was coming. They moved in a tight group now, closer together than before. The warmth they had built in the first hours of the journey, the small movements toward trust, the shared bread, the look between Cole and the boy had not disappeared. But something new had been added beside it, a watchfulness, a question with no answer yet. The hills rose on either side as they dropped into the east path. The path was narrow and the ground was soft, and their footprints stayed behind them in the mud, clear as signatures. Somewhere back in the village of Merca, a truck engine started up and drove south. Somewhere below the farm, a man named Dodd stepped out of his door and looked up at the hills. And somewhere on the east path, 5 people walked south through the coming rain, each of them carrying something the others could not see. The rain came hard and fast, the way rain came in the hill country of Cavan, without much warning and with very little mercy. Within 10 minutes the east path had turned from soft earth to running mud. Water came off the hillsides in thin, dirty streams that crossed the path every few steps. The group pulled their jackets tight and kept moving, heads down, the rain hitting the backs of their necks and running inside their collars. Rayan led with Tarek beside him now. The old man had taken the front without asking, simply stepping forward when the path became difficult to follow, pushing through wet branches and stepping over washed-out sections with a confidence that said he had walked this exact ground before. Rayan watched his feet and stepped where he stepped. Behind them, Mara kept her camera inside her jacket to protect it. Cole brought up the rear, turning every few minutes to look back along the path. Nadia walked just ahead of him, her bag wrapped in her jacket now, pressed against her stomach. The rain had soaked through her shoes within minutes and she had stopped noticing it. There were more important things to pay attention to. Cole noticed the first sign. He had been watching the ridge to the right of the path, the high line of rock and scrub brush that ran parallel to them about 200 meters up the slope. He watched it the way he watched everything, with the patient, steady attention of someone waiting for a detail to be wrong. And then a detail was wrong. A shape moved on the ridge, just for a second. A person, crouching behind a low bush and then going still again. Cole said nothing to the others. He kept walking. He began counting. One shape on the right ridge. He scanned the left side. Nothing visible. He looked further ahead, where the path curved around a fat stone shoulder of hillside. If someone wanted to close a trap on this path, they would do it at the curve. Put people behind, put people at the sides, put people ahead at the one place where the group could not run to either side because of the rock wall. He counted again in his mind. One visible on the right ridge. Almost certainly at least one on the left out of his sight line. 2 or 3 more waiting at the curve ahead. Maybe more. His chest felt very tight, but he breathed slowly and kept his face still because if he panicked now, everybody panicked, and panicking was the last thing any of them could afford. He walked fast and came up beside Nadia. "Don't react," he said very quietly, his lips barely moving. "Just listen. We are being surrounded. When I tell you to run, you run back the way we came. You don't stop. You don't look back." Nadia kept walking and looking forward. Her face did not change. "What about the others?" she said, her voice as quiet as his. "I'll tell them." He moved up beside Mara and said the same thing. Mara went pale under her tan, but she nodded once and kept her stride steady. Then Cole moved to the front, past Nadia, past Mara, past Rayan, until he was walking at Tariq's shoulder. "Stop," Cole said in English. Tariq stopped. The whole group stopped. The rain hammered the hillside around them. Everyone stood still and looked at Cole. Cole looked at Tariq. He kept his voice flat and very clear. "There are people on the ridges," he said, "and probably more at the curve ahead. You told someone we were on this path." He paused. "Was it Dodd? Did you send a message from the farmhouse while we were eating?" The old man looked at Cole for a long moment. The rain ran down his white hair and dripped from his chin. His expression had changed. The careful calm was still there, but behind it something else had appeared, not guilt, exactly, and not defiance. Something more tired than both of those things. "Dodd did not need to be told," Tariq said. "He saw us leave the east side of the farm. He would have gone to the road immediately." He paused. "I did not send for these people, but I am not surprised they are here." "Why?" Cole said. "Because the man who leads the patrol on this ridge knows my name," Tariq said. "We worked together a long time ago. I was a translator for the government and he was a government officer. When the war started, he chose the rebel side. He has been looking for me for 2 years. He looked at Cole without any particular expression. "He believes I know things that could damage the rebel leadership. Things I translated years ago that I was not supposed to remember." "Do you?" Cole asked. "Yes," Tariq said simply. Rayan stepped forward. His voice was not loud, but there was heat in it. "You brought all of this onto us. You knew this man was in this area and you brought us right through his ground." "I brought you through the only ground available," Tariq said. His voice stayed even. "Every other path is watched by government checkpoints. At least with Masood's patrol, there is a chance for conversation. The government soldiers in this region have orders to take no prisoners on the south roads." "That's supposed to make this better," Rayan said. Tariq looked at him with those dark eyes. "No," he said, "it is supposed to make it true." Cole had been thinking while they talked. He was looking at the hillside, at the curve, at the rain-wet rocks and the low scrub bushes. He was not looking for a way to fight. There was no way to fight without weapons. He was looking for something else. He was looking for the shape of the trap because every trap had a shape, and every shape had a weakness somewhere in it, even if the weakness was very small. "If this Masood wants to talk to you," Cole said to Tariq, "then he needs you alive. That means the others are leverage. He'll try to take us without shooting, at least at first." "Most likely," Tariq agreed. "Then we give him the conversation," Cole said. You go forward, you talk to him, you stall, you tell him you have information, whatever he wants. While you are doing that, the rest of us need a way off this path." Nadia had been looking at the hillside while this exchange happened. She was not looking at the ridge where the soldier had been. She was looking lower at the base of the slope, where the rain had carved a channel in the soft ground that ran along the foot of the hill before turning away from the path and disappearing behind a long section of fallen rocks. It was not large, barely a meter wide, cut maybe half a meter deep by the running water, but it ran in the right direction. And the fallen rocks at the far end were tall enough that a person crawling through the channel would not be visible from the ridge above. "There," she said, pointing. Cole looked. He measured it with his eyes. It was not good. It was wet and narrow and completely exposed for the first 30 meters. But it was the only option that did not involve standing still and waiting to be taken. "You saw that faster than I did," he said to her. She looked at him without smiling. "You were busy arguing," she said. Tarek turned to face the path ahead. He straightened his coat. He ran a hand through his wet white hair. Then he looked back at the 4 people he had been walking with for the last day. Something moved in his face that had not been there before. It was not an apology. It was something more honest than an apology. It was the look of a man who had been carrying a heavy thing alone for a long time and had decided to put it down. "The border guard captain I mentioned," he said. "His name is Yusuf. He was my student once a long time ago. I taught him French when he was 16 because his family could not afford a proper school, and I did it for nothing. He crossed to the border post 8 years ago, and he has been there ever since." He looked at Cole. "He will let you through. Tell him I sent you. He will let you through." Cole studied the old man's face. In the distance, further up the path, a voice called out in the local language. Rayan flinched at the sound. "What did they say?" Cole asked him. "They said stop moving," Rayan said. "They can see us. They are telling us to sit down and put our hands on our heads." Nobody sat down. "Go," Cole said to Tarek. "Walk toward them, talk, give us 5 minutes." The old man nodded once. Then he turned and walked up the path toward the curve and the darkness and the voice. He walked without hurrying. He walked like a man going to meet someone he had expected to meet for a long time. Cole turned to the others. "The channel, now, crawl, don't run, stay below the edge. Do not raise your head until we are behind the rocks." Mara went first. She dropped down into the channel without a sound and began moving on her hands and knees through the cold, running water. Rayan went next. Cole pointed at Nadia. She looked at him. "You go first," she said. "I go last," he said. She dropped into the channel. Cole looked back up the path. He could hear Tarek's voice ahead, speaking in the local language, calm and slow. He could hear another voice answering harder and louder, the voice of a man with a rifle and something to prove. The conversation was going. Not well exactly, but it was going. Cole dropped into the channel and began to crawl. The water was freezing. It ran over his hands and soaked through his knees and moved through his jacket in cold sheets. He kept his head down and moved fast, pulling himself forward on his forearms, his elbows digging into the mud. The channel curved slightly to the left after 15 meters, and in the curve the water pooled deeper, coming up past his wrists. He pushed through it. Ahead of him he could see Nadia's feet moving. She was fast, faster than he expected. She moved through the channel like she had done it before, like someone used to getting through small and difficult spaces. 30 meters. The voices above them on the path grew louder. Cole heard boots on wet rock, someone moving down from the ridge. He kept his face close to the mud and moved faster. Then his hand came down on flat stone. The channel had ended. He raised his head slightly. The fallen rocks were directly in front of him, tall and dark and solid. He scrambled up out of the channel and pressed himself against the back face of the largest rock. Nadia was already there. Rayan was there. Mara was there with water dripping from her jaw and her camera clenched in one hand. They looked at each other. Nobody spoke. Above them on the hill, Tarek's voice rose. He was saying something forceful now, something with weight in it, and the harder voice had gone quiet and was listening. Cole looked at the ground ahead. Beyond the rocks, the hillside sloped down into a wide, flat stretch of open land. And at the far edge of that land, maybe 2 kilometers away, he could see the dark line of trees and the low shape of buildings pressed against a hill. Bella's. He looked at the others. They had no food left. Their clothes were soaked through and the temperature was dropping. Nadia's hands were shaking from the cold. Rayan had a cut on his forearm from a sharp edge in the channel, bleeding slowly through his wet sleeve. Mara's camera was tucked against her chest and her eyes were steady, but Cole could see the effort it was taking to keep them that way. They were broken and cold, and they had just left an old man with questions in his past to face a man with a rifle alone, so that they could crawl through a freezing river channel in the rain. Cole looked at Bella's, at the trees, at the buildings. "Can you run?" he asked the group. Nadia stopped shaking long enough to answer. "Yes," she said. Rayan looked at his arm, then back up. "Yes." Mara was already standing. "Then let's stop asking and go," she said. They ran. They ran across the open ground with the rain at their backs and the dark town of Bella's pulling them forward like a hand reaching out across the wet field. There was nothing graceful about it. Rayan's arm was bleeding and he ran with his sleeve pressed to it. Mara's shoes had filled with water in the channel and each step was heavy and loud. Nadia ran with her bag clutched to her chest, both arms wrapped around it. Cole ran behind all of them, watching the hill at their back, watching the ridgeline, watching the spaces between rocks for movement. Nothing followed them, not yet. They reached the first buildings of Bella's out of breath and shaking and ducked immediately into a narrow space between 2 low stone houses. They stood there in the dark and breathed hard. The town was quiet around them. Not empty, there were lights in some windows, thin lines of yellow light at the edges of shutters. People were inside. They had chosen to stay in Bella's when many had left. That meant something, though Rayan was not sure what. Either it meant the town was safe, or it meant the people had nowhere else to go. In Cavan, both of those things were often the same. "Tarek said the border crossing is on the south road out of Bella's," Cole said when his breathing slowed. "He said the captain's name is Yusuf, that Yusuf was his student, that he will let us through if we say Tarek sent us." "And if he doesn't," Rayan said. "Then we find another way," Cole said. Nadia had sat down on the ground with her back against the wall. She was checking her bag with her fingers, feeling each item in the dark to make sure nothing had been lost or broken in the channel. Her hands were still unsteady, but her face was calm. She found everything in order and let out a slow breath. Mara looked at Rayan. "What do you think happened to him?" she asked. "Tarek." Rayan was quiet for a moment. He thought about the old man turning and walking up the path toward the voices, the straightened coat, the hand run through the wet white hair, the look in those dark eyes that was not an apology but was more honest than one. "I think he handled it," Rayan said. "He has been in difficult conversations his whole life. It's what he does." "You don't know that," Mara said. "No," Rayan said, "I don't." They gave themselves 10 minutes to rest, and then Cole moved them through the town. He let Rayan lead again, letting the local man read the streets and the spaces the way only someone from this kind of country could. Rayan moved through Bella's with less confidence than he had moved through Darren. This was not his city, not his streets, but the town was not large and the south road was not hard to find. It ran straight through the center of Bella's and out the other side, and where it left the town it met a low stone checkpoint building with a metal gate across the road. 2 guards stood at the gate. They wore gray uniforms with a blue stripe on the shoulder, border service, neutral in the war's terms, though everyone in Cavan knew that neutrality was something you performed rather than something you possessed. One of the guards had a rifle. The other had a radio hanging from his belt. Both of them straightened when they saw the 4 wet and ragged figures walk out of the darkness toward them. "Stop," the guard with the radio said, in the local language. They stopped. Rayan stepped forward. He kept his hands visible and spoke in the formal the way his uncle had taught him to speak to officials, not pleading, not aggressive, but clear and direct. He said they were travelers from the city of Darren who had come south on foot through the hill country. He said they were seeking to cross the border. He said they had no weapons. He said they were cold and hungry. The guard with the radio looked at the group. His eyes moved over Cole and stopped. A foreign man, tall, with a military way of holding himself. His eyes moved to Mara's camera, half visible inside her jacket, then back to Rayan. "There is no crossing tonight," he said. "The gate closes at sunset." "We need to speak to Captain Yusuf," Rayan said. The guard's expression changed. Not much, just a small tightening around the eyes. "The captain is not on duty tonight," he said. "Please tell him that Tariq sent us," Rayan said. This time the change was larger. The guard looked at his colleague. Something passed between them. The colleague turned and went inside the checkpoint building without another word. The first guard stood at the gate and looked at the group and did not speak. Cole stood very still. Mara breathed slowly and watched the door. Nadia looked at the road behind them, the direction they had come from, checking the dark. 5 minutes passed. Then the door of the checkpoint building opened and a man came out. He was perhaps 50 years old, compact and straight-backed, with short gray hair and sharp eyes. He wore a gray uniform with more stripes on the shoulder than the guards. He came to the gate and looked at the four of them in the way of a man who has learned to assess situations quickly and does not waste time on unnecessary expressions. His eyes landed on Rayan. "You said Tariq sent you," he said. "Yes," Rayan said. "Where is he?" the captain asked. "On the East Hill path," Rayan said. "He was delayed. He said to tell you that he sent us. He said you would understand what that meant." Yusuf was quiet. His face gave nothing away. He looked at each of them in turn, Rayan, Cole, Mara, Nadia, and her bag. He looked at Nadia's bag for a moment longer than the rest. "Medicine," Nadia said, answering the unasked question, "for people who need it." Yusuf looked at her face, then he looked at Cole. "You are not from Cavan," he said. "No," Cole said. "What are you?" Cole thought about that for a moment. "At this point," he said, "I'm just someone trying to get these 3 people across this gate." Something moved in the captain's face. It was brief and quickly controlled, but it was there. He turned to the guard and said something quietly. The guard looked uncomfortable. The captain said it again, more firmly. The guard reached for the gate and slid the bolt back. The gate swung open. Yusuf stepped aside. He looked at Rayan as the group passed through. "When you see Tariq," he said, "tell him the debt is paid." Rayan nodded. Then he stepped through the gate. The other side of the gate was a road that ran between 2 hills and disappeared into the dark. Beyond those hills was another country. A country where the guns were not firing. A country with hospitals and bread and roads that were not cratered. Rayan knew it was not a perfect place. No place was, but the guns were not firing. And after 3 years that felt like the most extraordinary thing in the world. They walked down the road in silence. After 100 meters, Mara stopped. She turned and looked back through the gate, back at Bella's, back at the hills behind it that rose dark and wet into the night sky. Somewhere behind those hills was Darren, still burning, still full of people hiding in ruined bakeries and crouching in alleys and waiting for something to change. She raised her camera and took a photograph, not of the checkpoint or the guards or the gate, of the hills, just the hills and the dark sky above them and the glow at the horizon that was either the last of the sunset or the light of distant fires. She looked at the image on the small screen for a moment. Then she put the camera away. Cole had stopped a few steps ahead. He was looking at the cut on Rayan's arm. "You need that cleaned," he said. "Nadia will do it when we stop," Rayan said. "I'll do it now," Nadia said, already opening her bag. Cole stood and watched her work, the quick and precise movements of her hands in the dark. She pressed a clean cloth to the cut, applied antiseptic. Rayan hissed through his teeth, and wrapped a bandage around it with 2 neat turns of the roll. She tied it off and sat back. "Done," she said. "Thank you," Rayan said. She looked at him. "Stop thanking me every time," she said. "We have been through too much for thank you." He looked at her for a moment, then he nodded. "You're right," he said. "We have." They walked. The road curved between the 2 hills and the wind dropped and the rain finally, slowly began to stop. The clouds above them thinned and patches of clear sky appeared, and in those patches the stars came out one at a time, sharp and cold and very high. Rayan walked and did not speak for a long time. He was thinking about his mother, somewhere in the north. He was thinking about Darren, the alley where he had grown up, the smell of the bakery in better times, the fountain in the square that had been dry for 2 years. He was thinking about the blue door in Mara's photograph, standing in the middle of everything that had fallen. He was thinking about Tarek, the old man with the calm, dark eyes, turning and walking toward the voices. He would go back. Not now, not soon perhaps, but one day when the guns stopped, and they would stop because they always stopped eventually, because nothing was endless even when it felt that way, he would go back. He would see the fountain working again. He would find his mother. He would stand in his own street and breathe the air of his own city. For now he walked south with 3 people who had been strangers 36 hours ago and were not strangers anymore. They had no name for what they were. There was no word that fit exactly. Not friends, the word was too small. Not family, the word belonged to something different. They were something that only happened in the particular darkness of a journey like this one, something you could not plan for or expect. Something that arrived only because everything else had been taken away, and what was left was only the most basic and necessary thing. The need to keep moving, and the people beside you who were also still moving, and the road beneath you that was still going forward. Cole walked with his hands in his pockets and his eyes forward and his shoulders finally, for the first time in days, not quite as tight as they had been. He was thinking about the boy, Sami, walking alone into the trees. He was thinking about Tarek in his long brown coat. He had not liked trusting the old man. He had not been entirely wrong not to, but the gate had opened and they were through, and sometimes a person had to allow for the fact that they had not understood everything. He had not understood everything. That was fine, he was still learning. Mara walked with her hand resting on her camera through the fabric of her jacket. She had enough footage, enough images, enough to tell a story that needed to be told. She would go home. She would sit at her desk and her sister would bring her tea, and she would work through everything she had, and she would make something out of it that was true. That was the only thing she knew how to give to a place like this. The truth, told to people who were far away from it and needed to know it was real. Nadia walked and listened to the sound the 4 of them made on the road, 4 pairs of feet, each slightly different, a rhythm that was not quite music but was not nothing either. She thought about the doctor. She would find a way to honor him, she decided, to finish what he had started, to get more medicine to more people. She was not sure how, but she was the person who had carried the bag through the channel and over the hills and through the gate, and if she could do that, she could find the rest of the way. The stars were very clear now. The road ahead was long, but it was clear, and the air smelled clean and cold, and the guns were not firing. They kept walking. They kept walking until the last of Cavan's hills dropped behind them, and the lights of the next town appeared below, small and steady and ordinary and bright. The way lights look when you have been in the dark for a very long time and had not been sure, until now, that you would see them.